Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the highly anticipated 15th episode of Tea with ALSA. Today we have the privilege of chatting with the remarkable Rita Kastrati. Not only is she the business development and marketing manager of an innovative fintech startup, but she has also forged her own path as the co-founder of Bees Flowers, a flourishing floral enterprise in the heart of London. As if that weren't impressive enough, Rita has also made her mark as a UN Women UK delegate, advocating for gender equality and empowerment on a global scale. So sit back, relax, and let's unravel her extraordinary journey while exploring the exhilarating highs and challenging lows of working in the dynamic world of startups. Hello, Rita. Thank you for joining us at Tea with ALSA for our season 2. First of all, how have you been?
Thank you. So thank you for the invite.
No worries, no worries. We're always looking to hear stories from people like yourself, people who are doing stuff in the startup world, but also who are also helping out the community on the side. I know you do a bit with the UN as well in terms of women's delegation.
Absolutely.
Is that correct?
Absolutely, yeah. So I've actually been elected this year to join. In March 2023, I've become part of UN Women UK. So it's been such an amazing ride, basically being able to be part of that.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I thought this would be a great conversation for people to listen about your, I guess, you joining a startup, talking about we've interviewed startup founders, which is great. They give us experience of starting up a startup, choosing the right co-founders. But it'll be interesting to, I guess, hear someone who's on the ground with the founders working on a product from, I guess, an employee
Mhm.
perspective, because there'll be loads of students who'll be looking like, what's the best career path? So, what I guess what made you want to go into a startup as your first job? Or sorry, that I believe this wasn't even your first job.
Yeah, so I've always been really, really interested in business in general. Very young, always wanted to know my options, get stuck into anything that I was doing. Whilst I was at university, we realized that one business what I love doing. So when I saw that there was this incredible startup that brought together sustainability and finance, I thought I need to be a part of it. So I think that's the main thing. I experienced both sides and realized that startup life is definitely more for me, definitely more engaging, and you're not just a drop in the ocean, but actually you're a huge part of a tiny team.
Yeah. I mean, as someone who's also worked for a startup, I also completely agree with you on what you just mentioned. But I guess, when you first worked for that big corporate role, there must have been some benefits, right? Do you know what they were? Do you think that if there was something more of that benefit, do you think that would have made you stay there a little bit longer?
Yeah, I mean, I worked there for 10 months and they gave me an offer to move to the US and work for them there. So that was pretty incredible. I think the timing was the one that wasn't quite right. So I graduated in 2020 during the pandemic. And obviously, that was a nightmare of moving countries, moving continents, etc., etc. I mean, the benefits when I was there is a lot of structure. So you definitely know what you're doing at all times. You know your team structure. You know what to do. You have these like perfectly chauffeured cars and these incredible lunches and all of that. Staying in the craziest hotels and doing that. Um, so, maybe if the time was right, I would have moved to the US and been able to experience that change in moving continents. I might have stayed, but definitely one that thinks that everything happens for a reason, and super glad that I ended up staying in the UK and actually working for Twitch.
Yeah, so I guess it was either US big corporate or London startup based, and you enjoyed the groundwork, the underdog. Um, so I guess when you decided to join your current company, Twig, um, I guess how did you identify? I know you mentioned sustainability and what they do was an important factor, but what other criterias did you use to identifying a good startup to work for? Because as we know, especially in London, it is very filled with loads of startups. And there's some good startups and there's some not so good startups. So how did you identify a good startup to join? Was there a criteria you had? Was there stuff you looked for?
Completely honest, I'd actually seen the incredible founder on LinkedIn before. He's actually a serial entrepreneur and Albanian himself. So this is his fourth startup. And I've always been sort of in awe of his work. I'd actually read a book about blockchain, which he contributed with a chapter. And the more I'd seen about it online, the more I'd read about it. I was like, right, this is definitely for me. In terms of identifying a good startup for you, I do think going and working in a startup is very much almost like, choosing someone to be in a relationship with, right? You're in a relationship with your job and with that company because your life essentially becomes that startup's life. So decisions you take, things that you do, all become part of what happens to the startup. So I do think you have to be very, very passionate about the goals and the values of the startup because they will become your goals and values, or they have to at least match yours. So I mentioned sustainability once, I might mention it a few other times, but sustainability and circularity is really the crux and the core of what Twig does. And for me, it's very important. But at the same time, the way that they were doing it and the innovation behind what Twig does was so attractive to me. So I definitely want to be part of it. So I think definitely passion, make sure that your values align. And number three, look into the people. You're going to spend a lot of time with them. You have to really believe in the founder. You have to really believe in the people that are building that. So do your research and yeah, jump
Yeah.
in.
I think that's something we hear from even the founders and people who build their team is the importance in the beginning to build that culture, to build that family unit, make sure everyone's in cohesion with the goals, because otherwise becomes a bit of a tricky situation if someone has a different vision then you have a different vision and it clearly doesn't work. But yeah, no, I mean those are some great tips for students to look for. Is this something that you're passionate about, the industry or the product? Is the founder themselves, are they believable as a leader? I think is also just as important, because I'm
Absolutely.
sure like you said, he was someone who had that authority in that industry because he provided the expertise. So it's also looking for that. And then thirdly, like you mentioned, is do you work well with the rest of the team? Is that something you see
Absolutely.
yourself being part of? And I guess, when you join a startup, tell us like what did you join as? What role did you take on when you first joined the startup?
That's my favorite question because in a startup, people just roles. They're just something that you have on your contract. But in terms of what you're doing, it's never really that. So I joined as a business development and marketing exec. So it's just one when I joined. I was pretty much straight out of uni and very much a generalist. And being a generalist in startups, in my opinion, is like the best job ever. You get to do the coolest things because you're doing everything from building a product, helping a team do that, to marketing, to business development, to customer service. So you really see the 360 of what goes into a startup. So I definitely think if you're someone that's done a more generalist degree or doesn't really know what the startup is for them, do join as a generalist role. And those roles seem to be, as I said, an exec role or a role. So an exec at a startup is very different to a corporate. It's usually almost right at the bottom. So I was just above intern and associate level. Um, yeah, just tried to do everything. Customer service wasn't my role, but the second I'd see someone say something on Instagram, I was straight on it, trying to see what the problem was, speak to the tech team, sort it out. So that's what I joined as. I had the incredible opportunity to really, as I mentioned, explore a lot of different parts of the business, and where I realized that my love really sort of what I stuck with is now I'm business development and marketing manager, but I'm also working on B2B side. So I speak to
Hmm.
other cool startups, give them startup advice, enroll them on our sort of startup program, and really help them grow. So I think all of my experiences that I've done in my life until now have always been working with other people, understanding them, trying to help them. And I think that really comes out in my work. So definitely, my advice is if you're joining a startup, join as a journalist, get stuck in. Don't become obsessed with your role. Don't become obsessed with your title. Your job there is to learn as much as you can, and everything's about what you put in. I've seen other people at startups say, "Oh, but I'm just doing marketing," and they don't look at products, for example. I've seen people just come in and say, "Oh, but I'm a product manager," and they don't look at other things. So I would say edge away from that and really get stuck into whatever and anything that you can do if you're fortunate enough to have a company that really allows that fluidity in what you're doing.
Yeah, I think one thing you touched on, which I completely agree with, on top of the other things, is the title. There tends to be, especially at a young age, I think it still happens even as you get older, that fancy title.
Mm.
Oh, what's that title? And I think when you're Albanian as well, doctor, lawyer,
Yeah,
having a fancy title, it's really cool. However, as you mentioned, when you work for a startup, title doesn't matter. It's the work that you've put in. Your title could be exec, but you could be doing the most amount of work, and because you've done the most amount of work, you have the most amount of influence,
absolutely. And
which
I
is
think
very different to a title.
absolutely. My title's manager now, but when I was an exec, which I was lower down, so before my promotion, I was actually speaking and managing more people, which was really ironic. I was doing
Yeah.
day to day with about 10 different interns that were based out in Albania and Kosovo, and now less so speaking to them and more so people in the UK. So I think, yeah, really emphasizing don't obsess about your title. Your title will come. And your role and what you do day to day is much more important than what you look like on LinkedIn or what you look like to your mom's friends, to your mom, to your family. So don't stress
Yeah,
about it.
yeah, I think that tends to be a big thing. How you look like in front of your mum's friends and family. I think
Yeah,
everyone's like that. They're always asking, "Oh, so what does that daughter do or that son do?" And then yeah,
absolutely.
making sure. Yeah, I guess from your perspective as well. When you joined a startup, was there any concern, from your end about stability or anything like that? Because that's also one of the, I guess, disadvantages to a startup. There is a lack of stability, or there is a lack of foresight, with that stability. Was that something that was a big concern for you?
For me, it wasn't huge, and I think maybe I was naive enough to not be concerned about it. But Twig had just had its seed funding, so it just raised
Mm.
£5 million, and at the same time, I also had my own startup. So for me, it was almost I was looking what I could learn from Twig to take away and do with my own thing. I didn't really envision that I'd be here for 2 years and still be raring on and being this and bold. But I do think, and I know quite a few people in the last couple of months, in the last year, that have, gotten into startup life, worked there for a month or two and been made redundant. So do your research, make sure they do have some sort of funding or plan to be funded, and understand that would you use this product in a year? Would you care about this company in 5 years? That's
Yeah.
probably how the market feels. So
Yeah.
completely understand the concerns that people may have and should have when going into a startup. Don't be like me that didn't really think about it and jumped in. But I was fortunate enough to actually did have that seed funding and heard about them on the press. Forbes had written about them. And I did think it was quite a legitimate and stable place to work at.
Yeah, there's two things I kind of want to jump onto this. One is about product, and something which I think even when you work for a big corporate company, when that product is good, when the service that they're providing is good, and it's something you can use, it makes it easier to do your job as well. And I think finding a startup where you yourself envision yourself not only as the professional and expert, but also as the consumer. Would you use this if you were in the footsteps of the person being sold to? Would you use this, and why would you use it? And I think that also helps. So making sure it's a good product. But one thing I do want to jump into is about your startup, your little. I shouldn't say little. Uh,
No.
big company. uh, I know now. I was the way I heard about you was actually through some articles. I saw you talk about setting up your startup during the pandemic with your mum. Um, Tell us a little bit about that, how that came about, because I believe from last time we spoke, you said it actually was your mum's idea or in the beginning, and then you kind of was like, "Let me jump in and
Yeah.
help."
Yeah, so I've always been fortunate. I grew up in a house full of entrepreneurs. Both my parents My mum is an experienced interior designer for, I think, almost 30 years now. She's, always been, I think, all mums are a little bit obsessed like with the home and having things perfect, but mine was on another level. That was literally her job, to design amazing spaces and make them feel like homes. And um, we also come from a family of hospitality people. So every restaurant we go to, they've done it and look at their flowers and look at their things. And, she was like, I should do this. So pushing actually of like me and my dad, we basically made her start a flower business and arrange for, so it was initially started with restaurants, so she was arranging flowers for restaurants, and then it turned into hotels, then it turned into luxury apartments, events, really spiraled on. So that was in 2017, which I helped her launch but wasn't too involved in. I would do it once a week. When we were doing the hiring, I was helping because I love interviewing people. But, it was something that I was kind of uni. I've helped co-found, but not involved in the day to day. But when the pandemic came along, as you can imagine, because she was only doing B2B, all of these contracts kind of slowly started, edging away. People didn't want to pay thousands a month to have flowers in their restaurant when their restaurant was closed, or people didn't really care what hotels looked like because they were empty. And she's a very perfect, like perfectionist kind of person. It's like, okay, well, if I can't do my business, I'll leave it. And when everything sets up again, I'll go ahead. Whereas I'm very like scrappy, love to get things done. And I was in third year of university and bored to say the least. When sitting at home. And I said, I've realized the more I go on my runs and the more I go outside and try to exercise outside because I was so bored, that everyone is ordering flowers. Like there's flower boxes all over the UK. Not that I was running all over the UK, but I'd seen it on the news. I'd seen it in my area. I assumed it was everywhere. So I was like, why don't we, you have the brand names, you have a customer base, people know about you. Why don't we actually make this B2C? And she completely pushed aside. I was like, I'm not getting involved. No way. B2C is so much harder. It's messier. It's not as profitable. I'm not getting involved. I was like, okay, can I do it? And she was like, fine, but you're on your own. So I set up a website, Instagram, all of that in the space of like 5 days. I was like, so raring to go. And we got 10 orders in the first week. And after that, sort of, it's history from there. So yeah, been going on with that. It's been a really amazing journey. Our USB really was sustainability. So I realized that the flower industry is a highly polluting one, not just from the wrapping and packaging, but actually from the sourcing. So I wanted to have local flowers for local people. So I would deliver in my area in Notting Hill. I would do it on foot or cycling. It was like 5, 10 minutes away from me. We had amazing neighbours, and then it sort of grew from there. So from delivering just in Notting Hill, we then started to do, we got an electric car and electric vans. We started to do all over London, and now we actually have partners to deliver all over the UK. So that's sort of in the last couple of years and what we set up in the pandemic, but it's really been a journey.
Yeah, and you've also appeared on newspapers, you know.
Yes, so
So
I was interviewed by a local newspaper in Chiswick, and they were really interested in young people setting up businesses. So I think I was only 20 when I was doing all of this. Yeah, in 2020. So they came, they interviewed me, and they were really interested in how I went from sitting at home doing my dissertation to actually getting it sorted, getting providers, you know, basically setting up for business.
yeah, I mean, to be honest, going from the pandemic where most people saw a loss in business to seeing an opportunity and running with it on your own, it is quite inspirational. So there is something there for people to take from, especially with the, running around and then an idea popping to mind and being like, hey, why don't I do this? Let
Yeah,
me figure this out myself and let me take on the challenge. Has that always been a mindset that you've had? Because I think when it comes to not only entrepreneurship but just anything like work, I'm a firm believer in the way you do anything is the way you do everything. Has that like a mindset of like, oh, if I'm walking around something, I will assess it in that business mindset, like, oh, what can be done here, like how does this business run, how do they make their profit margins, what's their distribution like, is there an opportunity for me to do something like that? Has that mindset
yeah.
always been like that with you as well?
Um, has, but I always think that it's a little bit unfortunate as well because it's a bit obsessive. So my brain doesn't
Mm.
really know how to relax.
Yeah.
I remember when I joined my secondary school, the Herodian in Barnes, everybody, like all the kids would bring in these like American sweets. And I'd always seen them in shops, but I had like a health freak mom that would never buy them for me. And I was like, what are these sweets everyone's having? And like, I couldn't find like a shop that had them. And once I finally did, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna buy loads and take them to school. And then everyone would take them from me, but I was always like trying to like sell them or trade them for something or for a pen or whatever. So I think it's a blessing, but also a major curse because your brain doesn't stop thinking about ways that you can do business, that you can make business better, or that you can bring out an opportunity from something. So that was literally me at the age of 11. And probably shouldn't be doing that. And when my parents found out, they were fuming, but it was just something I felt like I had to do. Like I just thought it was so obvious. Like I found tons of it. Why can't I just bring them to all my friends that love them? So yeah, I that's always been me, and I think it's definitely to do with attitude. So when I joined Wells Fargo, a huge, huge bank, I was the only female on the trading floor. And as a 19-year-old, I was petrified when I walked onto it. First, I was like, what do you even wear on your first day? I had no guidance because everybody that was hiring me was just male, didn't really think about that. For me, it's always just like suit, whatever. And I was like, do I have heels? Do I have to wear a skirt? Do I have to look a certain way? Do I need a blazer? All of that just was like buzzing around my head, couldn't sleep the night before. And when I rocked up, I realized I really am the only female on this floor. What do I do? And they honestly looked at me as if like a crocodile had walked onto the floor. They were just like, what is going on? And, either it was my age or my gender, but it was something that made people go, what on earth is she doing here? And so, admittedly, the first couple of days, it wasn't great, but I realized that that is something that I can play into my own like opportunity. So I was in a meeting with the Jewel CEO, and this was back in the day when, Jewel's still very popular now, but this was when they were absolutely booming, especially in the UK market. And it was a huge board meeting. It was a lunch, and I was right at the very end of the table. He was right at the very top. And he was just asking, like, I don't understand why there's so much fat and people complaining about underage kids using my product. Surely they're not. How do we combat this? And he was like, does anyone have anything to say? And nobody did. And I was like, you know what? I have a lot to say. I knew a lot of my friends using it. I knew a lot of my sister's friends who were underage using it. I was like, yeah, I do. And I told them, the reality of what's going on. And people can use them in classrooms. People can use them in the bathrooms at home. They're just so easy to hide compared to traditional cigarettes that you did have a big problem with underage smokers. And the whole room just fell silent. It was like, why is this child speaking? But actually, they realized that what I was saying was very much of value because I was 20 years younger than anyone else in the room, or maybe even 30. So, yeah, just to circle back to your question, is I've always been a very opportunistic person. Like from anything, the scariest and the worst opportunities, I do try to pick out the best, but also make it work for me. And I would say that to other people, it's quite like a skill to learn. It's not easy to be positive when absolutely everything seems terrifying. But think of it like, what's the worst that can happen? They could have all laughed at me, but I still would have been there. I was still invited to that meeting, whether I was at the end of the table or the top. Each meeting I was getting moved further and further up until the point where, an MD and managing director sat me down and said, I want to start having one-to-ones with you every week because your insight into the market is completely different and much more valuable than ours.
Mm.
So, yeah.
That's something you said there as well. I think the whole story you told was like really, really insightful. But one thing that you mentioned is the fact that, oh, where was it? I'm going to edit this bit out because I literally forgot my train of thought, but I did have a very good point. It was on the tip of my tongue. It was a really good point you made. There it is. It's about how you mentioned this is not a talent. It's not something you're given. It's something you have to learn to go with, which I think is really important to tell people because I myself am very similar in the sense like I didn't, and I'm sure it's the same for other people, and loads of other founders would say the same thing. It's not like they one day woke up and said, oh my God, I look at opportunity now. It was a mindset of shift to be like, let me be curious. Like you have to actively be curious. You have to actively be positive. It's not like you're just positive. You have to be like, well, this is an opportunity. So that shift in the cognition into the engineering of your mind, you have to shift it and actively change it. And I think that's something to bring up to people, because loads of people assume like, oh, this person has that mindset because things might have went a perfect way, whereas like not really. Yes, environment does affect your perspective, but also you yourself, when you are 18 to that 20 to 20 year 20s, that's the perfect time to shift your mindset and to have that, like, you know who cares attitude, move fast, break things, do it gracefully as well, do it, being like, yeah, if I'm going to break things, I'm going to be open about it, I'm going to admit to myself, like, I failed, but I learned. I failed, but I
Mm-hmm.
learned. I failed, but I learned, because you have the opportunity to do that. And like you said, you probably went through the same stuff of failing and learning. So, with that, what has been, I guess, the biggest lessons you've learned from failure?
Um, Fail fast. So don't be one of those people that's like scared to fail. Like say, I'm gonna try this idea because I think it's a good idea, but do it quickly. Be open about it, like you said, and then try again. I think the worst thing in business is to fail slowly and try to perfect something, come up with a product, come up with an idea after months and months of working on it and actually realizing the market doesn't care or people around you. And it's not just about the market, right? I'm not just speaking to founders. I think people are a little bit obsessed with becoming a founder nowadays. Not everybody is meant to be a founder, but even at work, like if you have an idea that you spend ages like working on it in the background, doing research on it, and then you say it after 3 weeks, the business might have moved on from that. The business might not care. Imagine if they don't care and you've just wasted 3 weeks. If you said it in your first week, you could have spent the 2 other weeks coming up with something. So yeah, in short, fail fast.
Yeah, no, that's very, very good advice. I think for anyone like in that 20s age range, especially when they're doing a startup as well, fail fast, learn quickly from the market, get as much data as you can. One thing as well that you mentioned, which I think is just as important, is that not everyone is supposed to be a founder. And one thing I've mentioned about entrepreneurship is, when I talk about entrepreneurship, they might assume, oh, it must mean you setting up your own business, X, Y, Z. But sometimes it's also about being an entrepreneur in a company, providing new products in the company, leveraging a new team, because that's still the same stuff. The only
Completely.
difference is, as you probably know, is that you just have more capital behind you, maybe less ownership to the whole company, but that's not to say that you can't build that over time, that equity over time.
Mm.
And you're, from what I can see, you're a prime example of that entrepreneur using entrepreneurship experience, but inside a company to develop your own role and make it what it is. Uh,
Mm.
would you agree with that statement of the entrepreneur and entrepreneur kind of being similar, but
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think people are not born to be entrepreneurial, people aren't born to be leaders. But if you are an entrepreneurial person and you want to be a founder, go ahead and try, but don't obsess over it. If we were all founders, the world wouldn't work. I think some of the best people I've ever met in managerial positions, or just positions in general in business, are people who have never had their own business. Um, we have a fantastic array of VPs at our company, and I think most of them haven't owned their own business, but they've worked very, very hard to be where they are, and they are fantastic at what they do. That doesn't mean that tomorrow they should all start up their own businesses. That means that they're great where they are, and they have a massive contribution to the company in what they're doing. So yeah, not everybody's meant to be a founder. If you have those redeeming qualities about you, and you are somebody that loves ideas, loves innovation, but are too scared to jump and do it yourself, don't worry, you don't have to. You can do it in somebody else's business, and actually, you can make more mistakes in somebody else's business, and it's less scary, and it won't affect you that badly. Yeah, I was even speaking to a friend earlier today, and she said the same thing. She said, I would love to help you with some of your startup projects because I'm too scared to do it alone. I work a public sector job, and I've never worked in the private sector, but I don't know how to do it. And I was like, yeah, I can give you a project, or I can give you a workshop. I can give you something that you can do, run, see if you like it. And if you don't, you don't. Go back to your job. Um, so trial and test yourself. I was the shyest kid on planet Earth, and actually I realized that, yeah, that's how I felt. But that doesn't mean that I couldn't have been a founder.
mm,
So you never know. Try a lot of things, try it in other people's businesses, try it on your own, but do it quickly.
Yeah. How did you escape that shyness? What made you escape being a shy? Were you always shy? Were you shy in school as well?
Yeah, I was extremely shy, like so shy. I would just like have to like beg myself to say something in class or in group. How did I escape it? I mean, it was a very long journey and it still is. Um, my dad actually would always say, Rita, smile more, Rita, fake it till you make it, Rita, speak to the neighbors, speak to this person, like really. It's like he knew that once I did start speaking, I could have a conversation. It's not like I was shy and then like socially inept. I
Yeah.
just had to like get into the conversation. I was fine. So once I sort of forced myself, like just get involved in the conversation and say something. And I've realized that it's not that scary, that once people will speak back to you, people will be interested in what you have to say, they will be interested in your ideas, then it was okay. So it's definitely a work in progress. Um, I go to a lot of networking events, a lot of meetings, I speak to a lot of people on a daily basis, and I still just say, you do have something of value to say it. Being shy sometimes does give the wrong impression. I think a lot of people used to think I was very rude because I didn't want to speak, and not because I didn't want to speak to them, because I was just too scared to speak. Um, so
Did you have a bitch resting face? Was that what it was?
yes, yes, and I still do sometimes, especially when I
Yeah.
don't want to speak to someone. I look like very angry, and I'm just not. I'm just
Yeah.
really thinking about
I
speaking.
think that's every Albanian. Everyone says that about my
Yeah,
dad. They're like, "Is he upset?" I was like, "No, he dashes his face. He's just
that's just the
always
thing.
like this, very
Yeah.
like yeah." So I think it's just something with us. Maybe as a demographic, we all need to figure it out. But yeah, no, that's I think being shy is like you said, loads of people when they see someone in that entrepreneurial position or entrepreneurial position like we mentioned, they assume like, oh, they must have always had it, they must have always been, confident or whatnot. But confident, like you've mentioned, it's something that's been built over time. It's something that you've done, you've proved yourself, and that made you more confident. And something you mentioned as well is, if you can fail without having the pressure of looking for the result and instead looking for the learning, that'll make you more confident as well, because you're changing the goalpost. You're not looking for, oh well, I need to create this product and it needs to sell 1,000 units in my first month. Instead it should be, oh, I'm going to create this product and I'm going to see what the market says to this product, and from that learning I'm going to then adjust. Once you change that, you become slightly more confident because you changed your goal, your parameters for what you're looking for. And it's the same with what you said about being shy. It's, yes, you're going to be shy. I was a shy kid as well, so I completely get that. Where it's like, and I'm sure it might be similar for you. I might be wrong, but I was the only Albanian kid in my area, so
Yeah.
I was like, like I had friends from all over the world. We called ourselves the UN because, we were from Iraq, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, everywhere across the world, right? But I was the only Albanian kid, so I was always like slightly shy with culture and everything and trying to fit in. And it's gonna come naturally, but over time, you build that confidence. The only thing that matters is that you give it a chance, you learn from it, and you don't beat yourself up. The only time I think it's important to maybe slightly beat yourself up is if you're not giving it your 100%. That's the
Absolutely.
only time. If you gave it your 100% and failed, then
That's so
hey,
good. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. When I went to my secondary school in Barnes, not only was I the only Albanian kid that's ever gone to that school, but no one even heard of Kosovo. Like they were like, "What? What is that?" What? And like the amount of people that thought I was from Costa Rica or from like I went to Croatia one time. Everyone thought I was from Croatia. Like it, they'd
nice.
never heard of it, and it was almost like I had to like educate everybody like where I'm from. Like there were even some teachers, believe it or not, that had never heard of Kosovo. And I wasn't going to school like in the middle of nowhere. Like, this is still London.
Yeah,
So I think that was a really interesting experience because my primary school, in major comparison, was here in Notting Hill, and out of 30 kids, 7 of us was in Gloucester. So big difference. Um, and not one that I didn't think that was going to be, the thing. But now everybody knows about Kosovo. All of our history teachers spoke about, Balkan history. All of my friends really want to come and visit. And then second Kosovo person at school was my sister, but still, all of the teachers, knew about it. Everybody was much more accepting, open-minded. They'd heard about me. They'd heard how loud I was about our culture and our history over time. So yeah,
Yeah, I think we're all loud about our culture and history. We
yeah,
are we are brand ambassadors. I think we should
we
all get
are
like we should probably all get some money they make from tourism, just
absolutely.
for the work we've been doing back home. Um, from we just talked about back home. Do you go every summer?
One of the only diaspora families that don't go in the summer, but we try to go at least once a year, and we usually go around April time, so it's usually
Oh,
the like Easter holidays,
yeah, yeah,
just because we love the weather then. Like
nice.
it's not very hot, it's not very cold, like
Yeah.
just right. Um, yeah, my family loves to travel a lot. So in the summers they're like hectic for us. We're like always somewhere. Um, but yeah, now that I've grown up, I'm really lucky to be part of Twig, startup that I work for, and we actually have a tech office in Pristina.
Yeah.
That was the biggest surprise when I joined the company and said, yeah, like we have a tech office, and they told me where, and I was like, literally, I have a house 2 minutes away from there. Like this is crazy. What are the chances?
Work from home.
Yeah, so I mean, going to Kosovo, a place where for me, often I found really boring, and it was just to see like family and sit at home, or whatever, go out. But for me, it wasn't really that interesting. To now being able to build this like amazing community of people that also work there, the people that I work with, my colleagues, and then have that sort of mostly office life, but then also being able to go out in the evening has been really, really cool and really fun. So I've been going so often now. I think since I started doing, I've gone like 6 times, whereas before it was once a year, once every 2 years. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's
no,
really changed it for me.
yeah, I think everyone's now the same where they try go as much as possible as they get a little bit older. Has there been any, I guess, you have that mindset, like we talked about that business mindset where you're looking at opportunity. And, I've been lucky enough to interview various people from both Kosovo and Albania who have their own startups. But, has there been any startups in Kosovo, Albania, that have Albanian founders that you have been interested in or that have piqued your interest? Has there been any of those recently?
So many, we could be here all day and all night. I'm a huge purveyor and I love to support Albanian brands. I think there's so many of them out there and they're not that big or nobody really knows about them. Um, I'm like the ultimate brand ambassador for Twig, amazing Albanian guy that set it up, and he's just incredible, like on another level. But apart from that, and apart from like 90% of our team being from Kosovo or Albania, there's also been a few. For example, I don't know if you've heard of Tringa Prince.
Yeah, yeah, lovely
She
girl.
does, yeah. So
Yeah.
I actually haven't met her, but I've seen her stuff online.
Yeah, we were lucky enough. I think she invited ALSA to one of our openings, like a year, and yeah, she had like, oh, it was beautiful. It was great, great time. The Albanian music started playing, and then everyone just went crazy.
Yeah, so I think she's great. I think you've also interviewed a friend of mine who I love. It's Swim by Alba.
Yeah.
Albana has an amazing brand. Um, Gosh, there's just so many. You definitely caught me on the spot. I think definitely those two. There's a lovely girl. I think she's also based here in London, and she does these t-shirts and these caps. I have very like I bought one t-shirt that said Muslim love. Um,
Yes, onboard
from this,
design, which we've
yeah.
also interviewed.
Well,
Yeah,
brilliant. I haven't
see,
seen
so
that.
you need to watch it. And they were lovely. Yeah, no, all these. I think we we met all of them. Interviewed Albana and the Armbo design team, two sisters, which is great. Yeah, no, that it's great also talking to a lot of these founders, especially in fashion, because they all have their reason for starting, and it's all so different, which is similar to
Mm-mm-mm.
any other founder and startup with tech space and whatnot. So, yeah, no, you're right. And I feel like fashion is one place that we fashion art is something we see a lot about as well from the Albanian diaspora.
Yeah,
So especially in London, I see a lot of it, which is
a lot.
great. Is great.
Fantastic. I
And
do
in
think.
yeah, go ahead. No, no, go ahead.
I think there's also a lot of, I think we really have to recognize and celebrate. There's a lot of work happening with tech in Kosovo that's also happening here. So there's a lot of amazing tech stuff happening. I think those are the ones that we really need to keep our eyes on because fashion always will be relevant, has been relevant, but tech is something that is growing and becoming stronger each day. Um, like, ultimate idol, Mira Murati, CTO of OpenAI. She is just a star and a purveyor that we should all just be in awe of what she does. But not just her, right? There's, Dua.com that, has been built. There's so much happening there in Kosovo um, that we should try, bring over here or support or talk about because really the innovations are great, but we don't have, we're not like the Silicon Valley, but we should try to be the Silicon Valley of Europe.
100%. I'm with you on that. And like you said, I think Kosovo as well has like a lot of tech startups, marketing agencies, in general, which again we've had the privilege of interviewing some and talking to a lot of them. So yeah, it's great. But I feel like we're still in the beginning with
So
these
much
sort of
so.
things. And one thing, I have this conversation with loads of other people where we tend to complain, right? We'll complain about things in Albania, things in Kosovo, and rightfully so. That there's reasons to complain. But one thing I always like think to myself, and one thing I mention is that in the last 30 years, our history has changed a lot. Albania left communism, the wars in Kosovo. After that, this is the first time in a while where like there's actually been a good amount of peace. Fingers crossed, nothing else breaks. But from that, it's now allowed loads of people to develop these startups and develop within their community. Also, from our end as well. With ALSA back. When I was in university, I'm sure it was the same for you. There was no ALSA. There was none of this. There was like nowhere I could really go to be like, oh, how do I connect with other Albanian entrepreneurs? So I feel like this is just the beginning, and I feel like it's important for people like us, yourself, me, the people we've interviewed to tell their stories, to let people know that hey, there is people like me out there. We are in similar mindset. We want to do good, with business and build within our community. And that allows people to reach out and be like you said, you saw the founder of Twig, who Albanian descent, you were able to connect with that and then also be like, I'm inspired by that, let me work for you. And then hopefully people can hear more founders from this and be like, oh, I'm inspired by that, let me reach out to Rita and her flower startup because I want to help
Mm.
out or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, what you guys are doing is so important and we definitely need more of it. When I was at uni, well, I've already explained when I was at school, I was there for 8 years. There was no other Albanians to relate to speak to. And I don't think I have such a big Albanian community as I should do. All of my friends ask me, do you hang out with a lot of Albanians? I'm like, apart from the ones I work with, not really. So yeah, I definitely think, what you guys are doing is great. I think also it'd be brilliant to shout out based in science. There's an incredible girl called Idea. She's a startup. It's almost like a NGO, I think.
Yep.
Um,
if
where
you
she,
if you sign up right now, you will be able to hear our interview with her soon as well.
sorry.
If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll be able to hear our interview with her as well soon.
Oh my goodness, I'm so behind. But yeah, she's brilliant. And I actually spoke to her a couple of weeks back. So I do get a lot of people that reach out to me on LinkedIn, want some advice or some mentorship or ideas on how to structure their team or be part of their team. But yeah, unfortunately, I can't work with her on a day-to-day basis, but I would love to just shout out to her and what she's doing. I think it's so great.
Yeah, no, it's great. And you mentioned one thing as well, which is that we all do have like I forgot, I do my own professional job and then I do this on the side. As you do yours, you got your own professional job and then you do your startup on the side. Things can get busy. It's always going to be hard to provide that, but having these moments where people can listen, people can interact, people can network with other like-minded individuals is just as important, because that one conversation could just change someone's output, in the way they look at things and be like, actually, wow, like there is people like this who are interested. So Yeah, no, it's something to which I'm excited about, and it's something that I think as the years will go on, I think that we'll see more of this, and I'm excited because I'm starting to see now loads of other podcasts come up of people interviewing Albanian professionals, which is great. We don't see it as competition; we see it as like, this is perfect. This is what we need, because the end goal is more important than the selfish victory for clout and
Absolutely.
being like, oh yeah, let me be the guy who made everything, and who cares. It's more, is everyone benefiting from this movement, from pushing this, which I think is important. I guess now, coming to the end of this, I would like to ask, I hope you did have a think, but give us, I guess, mistakes you would avoid in a startup, because we always get told good advice to take, but I always feel like every Albanian parent tells their kids, hey, learn from our mistakes, learn from your uncle's mistakes. So what are some mistakes that you made that you would tell people to avoid?
I think I get very wrapped up in like ideas and almost like obsess over them. And I think you know, I've already said like don't get wrapped up in ideas. So I think I've already given that advice in my fail fast advice. But I think I have a brilliant friend. He's creating a startup and has been working on it for over 2 years, but he's making hardly any noise about it online. And I'm like, oh my God, like you need to shout about it. And he's like, no, Rita, like you don't have to shout about everything. Build it and then go out. And I have a lot of respect for people like that who are so precise and want to get it perfect before it goes out there. So I think fail fast, but you can also fail quite quietly. So get your first 10 customers, get your first 5 customers, learn with them, fail, and then continue. Would definitely be one of my advice. I went out there and what I was doing, I think for me, it was like a very big USP of ours, is that we were using boxes that were like delivery boxes from supermarkets, from like really big, like, yeah, supermarkets, shops, and really big businesses, and repurposing them as our delivery boxes. Some people absolutely loved it. Some people absolutely hated it, but it actually became quite difficult to collect all of them and deal with the amount of demand that I had. Like Tesco's calling me up, like, we have loads of boxes for you. And I was like, I'm not getting 2K orders a week to take them. So, my advice, really try stuff out on a small scale before you go big. And that was my mistake. I was obsessed with getting all these boxes and repurposing them. And actually, some people didn't love them. They said, I'm buying luxury flowers from you, and then it's coming in a reused box. Don't love it. And then I had most of the people being like, I absolutely love it. So I should have tested with a smaller scale first and then gone out really big. But I think now that I really understand the market, I understand the order, I actually have more options of packaging. So you can have completely reused, you can have recycled, or you can have new but with like recycled products, and then sort of aftercare as well of what people can do with that packaging. So yeah, definitely my advice would be fail with a small group, fail fast, and you don't have to be so loud about when you do something. I think it's a very Albanian thing to go out and be like, guys, look what I'm doing. It's like you don't have to do that.
Yeah, very. Before there was social media, there was an Albanian guy shouting about what he was doing. So I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure. I think we all know one uncle who's doing stuff like that as well. And then I guess finally, has there been any books you have read that you would recommend to our listeners? It doesn't have to be anything you've learned from. Doesn't have to be non-fiction. It can be fiction, because any story can be motivational or inspiring.
Yeah. There's one book, and I always forget who it's by, but it's called The Go Giver. And um yeah, the writer of it gave it to my dad and was like, I hope you like this. So I think it's going to be like a nice thing. And it just, it completely exploded in popularity. And it actually has 3 sets of it. But the first one I've read like 3 times. It's really short. Essentially, it teaches you the art of giving and what that really means. And it's not just giving, 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 and completely using all of your batteries and what you have in you just to give. But what does thoughtful giving really mean? How it can benefit you in the future? I think a lot of people with entrepreneurship think it's a very selfish act. Nope. I've seen all of my best results come from times where I've helped someone because I wanted to, or help someone because they were in need, or help someone just because I had a little bit more time.
Hmm.
That will reward you in the future. But yeah, actually, I was thinking about rereading that book literally this weekend because it's so great. Everyone should read it at least once a year.
That's great, and I like that advice that being selfless, helping out, can actually benefit you in the long term. I'm sure there's various ways we can probably talk another hour about how this can be
Yeah,
beneficial to you. But yeah, no, I will. That'll be a book that I'm definitely going to have to check out, and I'm sure the readers, the
absolutely.
listeners here, will definitely check out as well. But Rita, thank you so much for taking the time today. It was a pleasure. It was great learning about how you started. You chose to join a startup. I didn't even know that the founder of Twig was Albanian himself. So there's something new we get to learn, which is great. Hearing that is amazing, and hearing your story as well. Being an entrepreneur in the company you work at, but also on the side having your own side project with the flower business, and that's succeeding really well. So yeah, no, it's been a pleasure to talk to you and hear.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much for this interview. It's been amazing to hear all the other amazing people that you've also interviewed that I definitely need to check out because I love their work. And yeah, it's always a pleasure to sort of share learnings, share mistakes, and being able to. So thank you.
No worries. All right. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Tea with ALSA. We hope you found Rita's journey and insights truly inspiring. Before we say goodbye, guys, we have a few requests. Remember to subscribe, share, like, and comment. Your support really does mean the world to us. Oh, and here's a little something for you guys. If you really enjoyed this episode with Rita, check out her blog she did for us, comparing the thrilling world of startups to the more established corporate realm. If you're curious, click on the link below to explore our Tea with ALSA blogs and delve deeper into this fascinating topic. We can't wait to have you back for our next episode, so until then,